Every glass of tap water you drink today passed through a system built on centuries of mass death. The cholera pandemics alone killed more people than most of the wars you learned about in school. In fact, waterborne illness has claimed more lives than any weapon ever forged. Humanity spent thousands of years unknowingly poisoning itself with the one substance it needed most. From the lead aqueducts of Rome to the corroded pipes of Flint, our progress is measured by how long it took us to notice the damage. We mastered the physics of moving fresh water millennia ago. The dying continued because our progress has always been reactive. We wait for the disaster, and then we build. To understand this pattern, you have to go back 2,000 years. The Roman Empire was an engineering miracle. At its peak, Rome delivered over 200 million gallons of fresh, cold water to its citizens every single day. But the Romans had a problem they could not see. The pipes that carried that water into private homes and public fountains were made of lead. They actually knew about the risks. The Roman architect Vitruvius wrote that water carried through clay pipes was much healthier, and he noted that lead workers developed a sickly, pale appearance. But the empire kept using lead anyway, because it was cheaper and easier to shape. The lead quietly accumulated in the bones and blood of Roman citizens, generation after generation. This marks a recurring historical theme, a major power choosing economic convenience over a known invisible health risk. That habit of ignoring the invisible cost millions of lives when cholera arrived in the 1830s. A person could wake up healthy and be dead from catastrophic dehydration by nightfall. But the medical establishment was looking in the wrong place. The dominant theory was miasma, the belief that disease traveled through foul smells and bad air. Because governments were busy fighting odors, nobody bothered to test the water. In 1854, a severe outbreak hit London, killing over 600 people in just 3 weeks. Dr. John Snow recorded who got sick and plotted every death on a map. It revealed a stark reality. Deaths clustered tightly around a single public water pump on Broad Street. Meanwhile, a nearby brewery had its own well, and its workers were untouched. Snow took his data to the local authorities, and the medical establishment dismissed him. The miasma theory was deeply entrenched, and the idea that invisible organisms in the water were killing people sounded absurd to them. Raw data rarely changes the minds of people who have already decided what is true. Institutions tend to protect their established beliefs until they have no other choice. That choice was forced in the summer of 1858. A severe heat wave hit London, and the River Thames literally began to ferment. The stench rising off the river was so overpowering it invaded the Houses of Parliament. Politicians abandoned committee meetings and hung curtains soaked in chloride of lime over the windows just to block the smell. The poor had been dying of cholera for decades, but Parliament only moved when they could no longer breathe. In a matter of weeks, they rushed through emergency legislation to fund an enormous underground sewer network designed by Joseph Bazalgette. The massive system intercepted the raw sewage before it reached the drinking supply. Almost overnight, cholera outbreaks in London dropped dramatically. Public health infrastructure only became a political priority once the catastrophe finally reached the doorsteps of the ruling class. Bazalgette's sewers stopped waste from contaminating the water, but they did not kill the bacteria that was already there. That required a chemical leap. This chart shows typhoid fever rates plummeting dramatically immediately following the year 1908. That was the year physician John Leal made a legally perilous decision to add chlorine to the entire public water supply of Jersey City. His peers warned him he would poison the public. Instead, that simple act of chemical disinfection nearly eliminated waterborne typhoid, cholera, and dysentery in treated systems across the United States. But clean pipes and treated water couldn't solve the human variable. In the early 1900s, an Irish cook named Mary Mallon was leaving a trail of typhoid outbreaks across wealthy New York households. When an engineer tracked the outbreaks to her, she fought back because she felt perfectly healthy. Mary was the first identified asymptomatic carrier in the U.S. She carried the bacteria, shed it in everything she touched, and showed zero physical symptoms. Her case forced public health officials to entirely rethink how diseases moved through populations. By the mid-20th century, the science of clean water was essentially settled. Any continuing outbreaks were now a matter of political and economic willpower. In developed nations with modern treatment plants and advanced testing, the idea of water as a lethal threat feels safely contained in a history textbook. Then came April 2014. To save money, the city of Flint, Michigan switched its water supply to the highly acidic Flint River. They failed to treat the water to prevent corrosion, and it began eating into aging lead pipes, repeating the exact mistake of the Roman Empire. Residents immediately noticed brown, metallic-tasting water. Children broke out in rashes, and a Legionnaire's disease outbreak killed 12 people. For over a year, state and local officials insisted the water met safety standards. It took independent researchers to bypass the government. A local pediatrician named Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha analyzed blood lead levels in Flint's children, proving they had doubled and sometimes tripled after the switch. Between 6,000 and 12,000 children were exposed to lead during their most critical years of development. The neurological damage is irreversible, affecting cognitive ability and behavior for the rest of their lives. Flint was a major American city in the 21st century. It proves the habit of cutting costs and denying consequences is still actively operating today. And Flint is a fraction of the global crisis. Right now, over 2.1 billion people on this planet still lack access to safely managed drinking water. We know exactly how lethal this is. In 1994, tens of thousands of Rwandan refugees survived a genocide, only to die from cholera in camps near Goma because their water was contaminated. The burden extends far beyond disease. Women and girls around the world spend an estimated 250 million hours every single day just walking and hauling water back to their families. The historical pattern remains unbroken. Rome prioritized cheap pipes. London ignored the data until Parliament choked on the smell. Flint denied the evidence until the national media arrived. Authorities act when the bodies pile high enough to force their hand. The engineering to save every one of those lives has existed for over a century. The fact that billions still drink from contaminated sources reflects a global failure of priority, not a lack of technology.